though.
I
It's
am
fine.
very authentic
Yeah.
and
Cool.
raw and real. And sometimes I pop a curse word here and there, but it opens the floor for other people to be authentic.
Yeah.
And that is like everything. So,
Yeah. So
yeah,
Jennifer Alvarado, what is your
yeah.
like official title?
There's a few.
Okay.
I sit on the National Interim Women's Committee for the DAV, which is the Disabled American Veterans. I also am part of Hamilton's Chapter 66. I'm their junior vice, and I'm just an advocate. I'm a veterans advocate, and I have my own business, which I do sound healing. So,
Yeah, I was looking at some of the literature you sent over to me. 1 in 3 military women report military sexual trauma. 1 in 5 experience domestic violence.
correct.
Why do you think that is?
Well, the military is not what people think it is. They think that there are these rigorous tests to get in. And there's a lot of people coming in off the street and they come from all different backgrounds, all different environments. And I feel like one of the biggest issues is you have a lot of young men and young women coming in, and a lot of these young men have never been around females before. They haven't been taught how to respect females and, that you can't say certain things in front of them. So I just feel like they focus on, fraternization and things like that. But there's a lot of people from all over the country that don't know how to act in a lot of ways, and some of these kids haven't even had parents. When we go through boot camp, we actually go through, different educational things. And one of them is they teach females how to wash because some parents have never taught their daughters how to wash properly or how to use feminine products. So I feel like it's not very blended. And I think that, as a woman, I'm actually both of those. I've experienced military sexual trauma, and while I was active duty, I went through intimate partner violence. And in a male-driven world, it's not easy to ask for help. When I went to my chain of command and I asked for help, that's when I endured my military sexual trauma. So it's a slippery slope in a lot of ways, and it's also a gray area.
So how do you how would you define military sexual trauma? Like what is the spectrum?
The spectrum would be from verbal to physical. I have female veteran friends that have been raped overseas in war zones that have endured physical sexual violence. And then, in a male driven world, you have the comments, you know what I mean? That's, a lot of, I think the sexual harassment is verbal. There's a time and a place for everything, and it just kind of becomes this common theme and you get used to it. And instead of saying something, you just kind of roll along with it. So it really doesn't get fixed.
So you went to your leadership to tell them about your domestic violence, and you were met with sexual trauma.
Yes.
What kind? What were some of the things you were experiencing?
So my situation, it didn't just, start happening overnight. I was going through physical, mental, emotional abuse, and I wasn't going to my leadership. It wasn't until, he wasn't coming home and they would put me UA, like, oh, she didn't show up for work, she wasn't here. And I started getting in trouble because it's like, what do I do with my kids when my spouse doesn't show up, my kids aren't in daycare? So there were signs and there were things that had happened. And believe it or not, I worked on an inpatient, outpatient, same-day surgery ward. And one of my officers pulled me to the side and she's like, I know what you're going through. I know what's going on, and didn't do anything. And that really messed with me for a long time. And it was a very long time before I started to ask for help again. It wasn't until the physical abuse got, to the point where I couldn't hide it anymore. There was an incident on base housing and beat the living crap out of me. I couldn't hide it anymore. My secret was out. I had to go to the same hospital that I worked at to get medical photography done. He stole my car, cleared my bank account out. So I had no choice. My secret was out. And when I went to my leadership, it wasn't a direct, military sexual trauma. It was the comments, and then, going out, and alcohol is a major factor in a lot of these instances, because that's where you relate to. If everybody's on the same base, there's not really too many places to hang out. A lot of people go to the bars and hang out, and when you add alcohol and different situations, it ends up to not so fun situations. And it really affected me for a long time. And it's one of the reasons that almost 20 years later, it was very hard for me to ask for help, because when I did ask for help, that's what I was met with. So I didn't trust anybody.
these numbers are pretty staggering here, right? Like 20%
Yeah.
of the women that are in the military are experiencing domestic violence. Do you think it's all attributed kind of to the alcohol culture that's on base, or do you think there's something psychological with the men that are married to the women? Like, is there something you think that like ticks for men?
I think that, and I'm going to say something that probably not all your viewers will agree with, but I had to take personal accountability for my role in, intimate partner violence. And I can't speak for everyone else, but I had my own role in it. I don't want to say I'm not a victim because I was. I'm a survivor. I don't care for the word victim, but I wasn't my best self, when I was in that situation. So I absolutely contributed to it. And I think that both parties have to take accountability because it's not just one. I'm sure there are situations where, it's a little bit different, but for me, it was a lot of trauma playing off of trauma. My role and my situation was much different. I was the one that was active duty military and my spouse stayed at home. So for a man, that can be degrading in some ways. Most men are the providers, there's security, and, so because he was a stay-at-home father, there was cheating. I mean, there was a lot of different factors, and I was one of them.
I wonder if like just being in this role that's stereotypically kind of thought of as like a man's role has anything to do with the the partner who's doing the abusing, thinking like kind of justifying it to themselves, like, oh well, she can handle it, she's
Yeah.
she's one of the guys now.
Yeah. I believe it or not, I was actually in 2 marriages that were physically, mentally, and emotionally abusive. I was a young kid. I dropped out of high school because I got pregnant, and that was why I joined the military. I didn't want to be just another single mom. So I was a kid, and so was my spouse at the time, and we threw ourselves into this situation, and it was much different than we were used to. We were both born and raised in Jersey, and I went and, to the duty station and everything. And there was a lot of things, like I said, factors. Alcohol was a major factor. And, if you talk to a lot of military about base housing, there are a lot of things going on in base housing. And let's just keep it real. The military is not, it is a great place. I love it, but it's not free of the problems of the world. You have, couples that are doing things that they probably shouldn't be doing. And, so sex and alcohol and all these different things. And then you put the stress of the job, and then you put, possibility of getting shipped out. So there's a lot of different factors. And I do think that, there's so many things in the military that are acceptable for men. When you throw women into that, they don't know what to do.
So you go through this, you finally gather the courage to go to leadership. You're met with more trauma, basically, and then I read you applied for the DAV. Is it the DAV, like help for depression, and you were denied?
So the DAV is the Disabled American Veterans. They are a veteran service organization that works and helps veterans get their benefits. Now, the VA healthcare system, that's who you put your claim into. So I originally, in 2006, when I got out, I applied for depression. I knew something was wrong, but I didn't know what was wrong. And I originally got denied, and believe it or not, that case is still open, and I am still fighting that claim.
Really?
I am. I finally, it took me 20 years to file that claim because one of my biggest fears was that if I admitted and I told what was going on, I was afraid that they were going to ask me who did what and when, and police reports and all that, and it was nothing like that, So I filed my claim in 2021, and I told you about the incident that happened on base housing. Well, they made us go to one therapy session, and the doctor then determined that I had symptoms of PTSD, but didn't even tell me about it. So I went 20 years of pain, suffering. I caused generational trauma to my children. I hurt my parents because I had to go through my own, processing. And unfortunately, it took 20 years. But 2021, I filed my VA claim, and I'm still fighting it. I'm up, as high as I can get it. And I got approved for my military sexual trauma and my PTSD, but I'm fighting the effective date. So I'm trying to get it to go back, because what kind of doctor documents in your medical record that you have PTSD and doesn't tell you about it?
Mm-hmm.
So I didn't have a fair shot from the beginning. And when you get out of the military, they have, a processing out type of class, which is, it's a joke in all honesty. But there really is no transition from military to civilian. So I got out a battered woman with 2 children, didn't know where to go, what to do. I came home and just kind of did the best I could and failed quite a bit.
Do you think you could articulate it all, the trouble with going from being on base and in the military to civilian life? I think for people like me who, I have no idea what it's like. I can't even begin to think about what that even means.
So when you go into boot camp, they strip you of everything, your dignity, everything that you've been taught, and you are taught all over again. So your mentality is completely different. You're taught to pay attention to detail. You're taught to be on alert and just be kind of on the ready. You know what I mean? Because if not, then your shipmates or your sailors, and they could die. So that breakdown and that stripping you of who you were, you put this uniform on and you got to, your gig line's got to be straight and you have to be squared away. But when you go home, they don't tell you how to go back to the civilian life. You're literally a military person just being thrown back into the civilian life. You go through a class that helps you with your bank account, tells you a little bit of this and a little bit of that, but there's no guidance, there's no direction. So you're just literally thrown back into the world. And it is so impossible to relate to other people because other people haven't been stripped of who they were, their identity, and then to just go back and figure out who you are. It's scary.
So it seems like it seems like some of the tools that they give you when they essentially brainwash you could be useful.
That's what it is
for real life.
Yeah.
But you're saying that the just going from that structure to just wide open is unbearable.
And I think you just said it, structure. You know what I mean? I consider myself similar to somebody who's been incarcerated for a very long time. Structure works for me. I need structure. If I don't have that structure, I'm not functioning properly. You go from being told when to eat, sleep, poop, and all that to just, here you go. What do they expect anybody to do?
Do a lot of people just go nuts? Do a lot of people like a teenager who's their parents are super strict and then they go to college and they go fucking crazy?
Some people do. I know I did. When I came home, I was just kind of
the freedom, you don't know what to do with the freedom.
Well, it's like freedom, and then nobody understands what you're going through, and I'm not a combat veteran. I wasn't stationed overseas. I went through my own battles, having, experienced intimate partner violence and military sexual trauma. But when I came home, I picked up that bottle. I was I wanted to go out to the club. I wanted to drink because I couldn't relate to anybody. No one that I was around knew or realized anything that I had been through. They didn't understand how badly I needed that structure to continue, and I didn't know that. So what did I turn to? Was drinking, and that didn't get me anywhere that I needed to be. And I got to a certain point, I was like, what kind of job do I get? You know what I mean? The VA hospital wants me to go to appointments 3 times a day, or 3 times a week. How do I take care of my kids? So you're just kind of.
Was that for the PTSD or for the
I was
stuff
trying.
that you applied for?
Yeah, I was trying at that point.
So they're just evaluating you 3 days a week and giving you.
Yeah, they send you.
Claim.
No, because you have to have a paper trail. You have to be diagnosed with these different things. I was grateful because I had, some other medical issues. I was able to file some claims while I was processing out. I think I got out. I was 10%. So it was a couple $100 a month. Why
are they so strict with diagnosing it? I feel like they'll diagnose kids really quick, really quick. And then, you go through this whole thing in the military and they want to see you a million times. Why do you think it's so hard to get diagnosed with something? Why are they so careful with it? Do people abuse that?
Well, people abuse anything,
well, yeah.
But I think their guidelines are changing. They're trying to change the guidelines, and they've done that recently with the PACT Act and, presumptive cases, people that were doing burn pits. But I think a lot of it is they don't know. Each generation of, you figure Vietnam veterans are nothing like our veterans that are coming back now. They've experienced different things. And I think a lot of it is trial and error. They learn as they go. unfortunately, with the PAC Act, because it is so great and it opened up all these things, now you have a lot of claims that are back. They're being, it's taken a long time for them to get approved and processed. But I think one of the bigger issues is getting the veterans to even file the claim. There's a lot of veterans that don't even believe they're veterans. My mother's one of them. My mom was a Vietnam vet, and she's like, oh, I don't. I'm like, get your DD 214, file a claim. Oh, I didn't do anything. I don't deserve it. And I'm like, what? Like, are you crazy? Like, you served our country, So I think it's a combination of a broken system and a combination of veterans just not being educated on what to do when they get out and where to go. Like I had no idea what the DAV was. I thought it was an organization that helped older veterans. And then I, was like, I need help. I got into the DAV because I got sick of my own shit. That was 20 years of, I got out in 06. I told you I filed my claim in 2021. And that's what it took for me to get the help that I needed, was to get sick of my own shit. I ended up in another marriage because I didn't know that I had battered women syndrome. That one almost killed me. And that was my breaking point. I got sick of my own stuff, and I filed my claim, and here I am still fighting for it. And now I get to advocate for other women. But what it took was for me to take my box of medical records into a DAV office in Philly and say, I'm not leaving until you help me. Like, I had burnt all my bridges. I was at rock bottom. I was hitting food banks. I couldn't pay my bills. I was a hot mess. And it was because I had no one that gave me any direction on where to go and what to do.
Man, it's funny you bring up like the comparison from Vietnam to today. I think the military's done a great job on marketing.
Yeah.
I don't know if the difference is really that big, but they do. Like, you think about the Vietnam vets, and it was always like these unkept people that just they had blankets over their windows, and they, were scared of the sun, and they didn't come out to talk to anyone. That's like kind of like the picture you think of.
Yeah.
And today you think of like military people, and it's like they have a cape on.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of that's marketing. Like, I think the military's doing an excellent job of marketing. And you also bring up, just the addiction and rock bottom. And it's funny, like the military and construction actually have like a lot of similarities.
Really?
in the yeah, I mean, addiction is extremely high in construction. It's like you're like, I forget the exact numbers. I don't have them written down, but you are way more likely to be addicted to a abusive substance if you're construction. And it's weird. Like it's almost like this control thing, right? Like where you have no control over anything in your life at all, and like the one thing you kind of control is like how you feel.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I have experience with rock bottom. I know Flounder has experience with rock bottom. He's a recovering alcoholic. I was caught up in the opiate epidemic for a while. So yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of like parallels there with kind of military and construction in some kind of way.
Yeah.
You talk about your rock bottom, and you say that's it looked like homelessness, food banks,
and I had kids.
Yeah.
And I was trying to take care of kids too. And the VA did that to me. At the most I was at, they had me on like 18 meds a day. Benzos, pain meds. I mean, you name it. I could walk into a VA healthcare system at any, and say, hey, I need Vicodin 10 milligram. Okay.
And none of that was like getting to the root of the problem. It just made you feel better temporarily.
Well, that was the issue, is nobody was getting to the root of the problem. They were only taking care of the symptoms. And it's like they have you on one medication for this, and then you have, symptoms of something because of that medication. They put you on another one. So it's just this endless cycle of medication abuse. It's changed a lot, with, the whole opioid crisis and everything. It has helped a lot, but there's still a problem at the VA with giving, this generation of veterans, I do think is much different than ones in the past. And it's because we're not accepting no. You know what I mean? We want to get better. We want help. And a lot of us want holistic help. I don't want pills. I don't, if I have to I've done PTSD group therapy. I've done battered women's therapy, and it was the best decision I've ever made in my life because I still use those tools today. And it helps me help other people. But at what point do we say, okay, we're part of the problem and let's come up with a solution?
What are some holistic approaches that you can see coming?
Well, right now, the VA healthcare system in Philadelphia has what they call the whole health, and their marketing stinks. I've already told the director, you can't set a table up in a hallway and think veterans are going to walk up to it. 99% of us are just going to keep on moving. You have to get out. You see a lot of these younger veteran service organizations like Balanced Veteran Network and Grunt Style. They're getting out here and they're doing marches, Irreverent Warriors and things like that. Those are the life-saving events that people want and need. Yoga, the Battleship New Jersey, they have a yoga initiative now. They're doing yoga on their sound healing. There's a lot of different modalities. People with trauma, that trauma doesn't go away. It's stored in our bones. It's stored in our muscles. It's stored on a cellular level. And if we don't heal it at the root, it's always going to be there. Me hitting rock bottom was because I continued, instead of finding structure, I found unhealthy habits to get me through that 20-year period. Little drinking here, a little pill here, that's what got me through. And like I told you, it wasn't until I got sick of my own shit, like this isn't working. Like I'm keep ending up in the same circles, the same, cycle of BS. And when I went to the battered women's counseling and I went to PTSD group therapy, that helped me a lot. But sound healing, I use frequencies and singing bowls to help me get into this meditative state where I can go back to, these instances of, domestic violence and military sexual trauma and even childhood trauma. I can go back and revisit those scenarios from a more healed version. So I'm not going back as a hurt version of myself. And those are the things that I'm interested, psychedelics are a really big thing. I'm very pro mushroom, pro ayahuasca. I told you
Are they the same thing?
No, they're not.
Oh, so DMT is ayahuasca, right?
No, that's one of the components, but there's two different things in there. I actually, when I filed my PTSD claim in 2021, I had done a 30-day guided microdosing journey with another veteran, and it was the best decision of my life. There was integration. I microdosed, so I wasn't like, seeing crazy things or anything like that, but it gave me the ability to have all of the feelings and the emotions that I had and still function. You know what I mean? I could get up and do what I needed to do, my house chores and be a mom and be all these things, when before that microdosing, I struggled in those areas. I dealt with, high functioning depression, complex PTSD. So I had to change my life to adapt to those different traumas. And it sucked because I wouldn't go out in public. I wouldn't go to the movie theaters, and my kids suffered for that. So, doing mushrooms in a more, controlled space where I could process everything, and I had somebody to talk to, and I had daily affirmations, and I had specific traumas that I was working on. I believe John Hopkins is they have some veterans work that they're doing over there now. My boyfriend is actually doing an article with the DAV on psychedelics because we want to be on the forefront of it. Veterans want, that type of holistic care, and it's working.
Do you understand like the biochemistry of why it helps?
It changes the neural pathways in the brain. So think about somebody who's had a brain injury. I've had a couple traumatic brain injuries, and when you get your brain banged up, it's a muscle. Sometimes those neural pathways no longer work. So when you take the microdosing, the psilocybin, when you take that, it not only repairs some of those pathways, it finds new ways to get those receptors to connect. I think it was Japan or China. They actually used mycelium to create their subway system. That's how smart it is. And it does the same thing with your brain. Yeah.
Yeah, I was looking into that a little bit because I kind of thought we might end up talking about this some, and it brought me to this like self-referential thinking. Have you heard of that?
Probably
like,
in different terms.
So it's like when you connect your identity to like trauma.
Yeah.
And a big part of like PTSD is not being able to separate yourself from the trauma that you experienced.
Yes.
And it says like the psilocybin mushrooms and I guess drugs like DMT or ayahuasca.
Yeah.
They kind of help facilitate that in the brain's ability to like separate yourself from your trauma. And that seems to help people quite a bit.
My experience was a little bit different. I wouldn't say separate. It helped me connect. It helped me connect with self. My trauma, like my identity was hard to find because again, I was a stellar sailor, and I was pushed out. If I didn't go through what I went through, I probably would have been a career.
What like things did you go through?
Man, I got to, like, in a good way, or you were talking about the negative
The
stuff or
negative
the
stuff.
negative
Yeah.
stuff? Well, I don't want to speak for anybody else, and I do want to kind of, make sure that I watch what I say, but I experienced a lot, like a lot. And I don't want anybody to think that, the military is this bad place, because it's not. But there are humans in the military, base housing, there are all kinds of things going on. I mean, again, like I said, with the alcohol, you have some couples that are sharing their spouses, and, the same things you have going on over here, and alcohol, you have chief warrant, or not chief warrant officers, but you have chiefs and just different higher ranking officials that, in their coffee cup, they have alcohol and stuff. So I got to experience a lot of really amazing things. I want to state that first. I got to do gun quals and take a lot of classes, and I got to my education. When I got out, I was able to get a job at the Burlington County Health Department after I got out. So I set myself up, but I got to endure a lot of really messed up things too. One of the toughest things for me, being a partner or intimate partner violence victim, when I did go through a really bad experience when, base housing police got called and all that, I had to go to the hospital that I worked at to get medical photography done. And, you'd think with HIPAA and all that, things would be hush hush. But I had people that I was working with that had to put measuring tapes on my body and take pictures of bite marks and take pictures of bruises. And like every other, workspace, it gets around, and so I had to deal with the shame of everybody figuring out what was going on, and then the shame of having to go to work and everybody talking behind my back, and just trying to continue the one of the big things with female veterans that go through different instances, especially, military sexual traumas, they try to med board you out. They don't know what to do with you. They don't want to deal with you. So they just kind of, push you out of your service, and you have no choice. I've experienced where, we had a petty officer that he had HIV diagnosis, and he ended up getting in some trouble because fraternization, you are not allowed, if you're a staff member, you can't associate with the students. And this gentleman was trying to associate with one of the students and didn't disclose his HIV, and got knocked down, and we still have to treat him. So it's just, navigating a more male-driven world in a military setting, in a structure setting. I can deal with any comments. Like, I could go onto a construction site and there's nothing anybody could say to me that would, offend me or irritate me, because it's that same type of mentality, like the cat calling and things like that. It's the same thing in the military. There's a lot of units that have all men, and then there's one female. And you either have to roll with the punches or you're not going to make it there. So it's like, what do you do? Do I say something that, hey, I'm enduring this, or do I just kind of like go along with it and you shoot the shit back and, you keep moving about your day?
Is shooting the shit back bad? Like, do you consider that a bad approach?
I think it's a coping mechanism, and I think that that it's needed sometimes. If not everybody will agree with this, but if you're a female and you want to be in a male-driven industry, then that's some of the things that you have to look forward to, in a sense. And I'm not saying it's right or wrong, but men are going to be men just like women are going to be women. And I think that, to an extent, you have to tolerate, certain things, because how do you get about your day in the construction field? You got to shoot the shit, and you guys have your banter. And I don't think all men mean that in a negative way, or, or in an insulting or a harassing type of way. I think that that's how men are taught to be men. You kind of expect it.
Well, you're also, like, as a man in construction, you're also kind of like, like for me, for example, like, I always feel like if I change kind of like what I'm saying or how I am around the women, that I'm kind of being like sexist in a way.
Yeah.
Which doesn't make any sense,
Yeah.
I guess, kind of, in a way. Man, that's like, do you think it's like a systematic failure that it's
Absolutely.
like that?
Absolutely.
So, like in your ideal situation, there is none of that shoot the shit and just fall in line and just like grow thicker skin.
Well, you have
It's
to.
everyone has to change. Or do you see
I think
that
that's
as something?
unrealistic.
Yeah, okay.
I think it's unrealistic. I think that at some point in time, you're going to have to, roll
Do you
with the
think it's
punches.
wrong on the part of men?
I don't. I don't think it's wrong. I think that, listen, I think everybody deserves respect, everyone. But I don't think that if I'm going into an industry, I can't expect that whole industry to change for me. That's selfish. I can't go to a job site and ask these, oh, you're not allowed to, talk like that or whatnot. Me personally, I can't speak for other women. There are some women who are like, nope, they are, yes, they might be extreme feminists or whatnot. But me personally, I've been around and worked around men my whole life. So for me, I don't personally mind. I'll just ignore it or I'll let it roll off my shoulder, but not all women can do that. So it's like, where do you find that happy space? For me, I think it is a systematic problem. I don't believe that women belong in certain areas of the military. I think that's part of the issue. Why do you have women in these situations when you know that you can't control some of the outcomes?
And isn't that sticky? Because that's what women are fighting for, is to be in every situation.
I know women are fighting for that. Me personally, I don't believe we should have a female president. I think that depending on who you talk to, I think you're going to get a different answer. But women don't belong in combat. Women don't belong on submarines. There are certain situations where, listen, at the end of the day, you could be whoever you want to be. You can sleep with whoever you want to sleep.
There are some women though that can be in combat.
Absolutely.
There are. It's not a vast majority. It's not 1% of the 17%.
No.
Of the women that are in the military.
But that's the problem.
It's like it's a diamond in the rough.
And what do you do with that diamond in the rough? Do you put that diamond in the rough with, all the other coal, or do you put it in a different compartment all by itself? I feel like in some situations you're damned if you do and damned if you don't.
So I'm almost getting like a vibe that you kind of would be okay if they just said no more women in the military.
I wouldn't necessarily say I'd be fine if they said no more women in the military, but I would not be opposed if they limited the MOSs that women could be in. I wouldn't have an issue with that. I have a daughter.
Do you think there would be, if they did that, there would be this.
Oh, there'd be an outrage.
There'd be an outrage. It would be a small majority, but there would be an outrage.
There would. But I think if they looked at these statistics,
what do you, how do you,
you're damned if you do, damned if you don't. And I think right now in the day and age that we live in, there is no middle. There's extremes on both ends. So it's like, you can't make anybody happy. But on the same note, this is what I think about is I have a 6-year-old daughter. There are some military MOSs I would not want my daughter, I wouldn't want my daughter to join right now. Because I know what she would have to deal with.
What's an MOS, by the way?
An MOS is like your job. I was a hospital corpsman, so I was a hospital corpsman 3rd class when I got out. My job was a hospital corpsman. They have machinist mate and, different other, jobs. And some jobs aren't meant for women. Why would you want to put women on submarines? Mm-hmm. If you have a sub that's down under the water for 6 months, what do you think that's tough? There's young men that they lack the mental capacity.
That's scary to think about.
And think about all the women. What do you do?
Imagine month 3, some shit starts going down.
What do you do?
Stuck.
It's
in jail with this bear.
Exactly. Yeah. And not for nothing, but men are going to be men. You can't put men in a box and expect them not to be men. You know what I mean? If you're an attractive woman, then you know what I mean. This is everyday life. Walking down the street or going to the grocery store, it's no different in the military. And like I said, I personally believe that there's certain positions that I don't think women should be in combat. I don't think they should be on submarines. I think that, medical and certain other, MOSs is good. Do we have those amazing, Marine women and other women that, are kicking butt and all that? Yeah, absolutely. But at the end of the day, that's 1 or 2 or, a handful. What do you do with the rest? Do you put them in situations where ultimately that these things can possibly occur?
Is there anyone fighting for that? For exactly what you're talking about?
I don't know. There's a lot of people fighting all over, but I haven't seen anybody that's like directly going after the DOD. Like, how can we fix this? Because at the end of the DOD is the Department of Defense. Okay. So you have all your branches, and that's what they fall under. So at the end of the day, it's the DOD's responsibility to either create these safe spaces for men and women. Because if you looked at the report, it's, I know 1 in 50 men in the military experience military sexual trauma. That's insane. 1 in 50 men.
Is that a lot or a little?
I think that's a lot.
Yeah, I would say that's a lot too.
Like 1 in 50 men are experiencing military sexual trauma.
Compared to women, it's not that much.
No, but you also have to realize too, there are currently 600,000 female veterans to 7 million male veterans. So that's one of the things that we're fighting for in the report, as well, is so through the VA healthcare system, when we go to talk to our doctors or we go to mental health and primary care, there's no algorithm or designators to put red flags for female issues. Like, think about it. Women go through menopause, this report fights for gender specific care because we do go through menopause. We go through pregnancy, military sexual trauma. There's a lot of different things that women veterans go through that men don't experience.
Yeah. And it's like, sorry.
Right? It's like a slippery slope. It's
it is. It is a slippery slope.
Do you think women should be in the military?
I think there's some women. I think they should vet the process. I don't think it's fair for 33% of them to experience military sexual trauma.
Yeah. Not at all.
Or 20% of them to experience, domestic violence while they're in the military. And if it's the military that's causing these things to happen, like how many, so if there's, 17% of the military, I don't know how many women that is raw numbers, but if this 1 in 3 were not in the military, they would not experience sexual trauma? Like how many of them would?
Yeah.
Maybe 1 in 20?
I'm not sure. Those 1 in 15?
Yeah, I'm sure there's statistics out there. I mean, I don't. It's hard to say. I mean, yeah, could a woman be a good sniper? Sure,
absolutely.
I mean, I never really put this kind of thought into it. Yeah. To be totally honest with you, I think about it in construction terms. Like I've thought about it in construction, and I know a lot of, like, we had on Chelsea Fenton. She's from Massachusetts. She's a badass chick. She's like a foreman on a concrete crew. She's just
very cool.
She's a dude, not in a bad way, but she's like one of the guys, like she's, and I don't mean that. Whatever. I'm probably fucked that up. Whatever. But and we've had on Stephanie Baldwin, who's another women in construction. She just got promoted to like a trainer for the Northeast region. I mean, like they're women, and they, like you said, like they let a lot of stuff roll off their shoulder. You don't have to change the way you talk around them. You don't have to talk to this guy different. You don't have to oh shit, I shouldn't, you don't have to do it. There are a lot of women though that you do.
Yes.
And you have to be very careful. And they have their phones out and they're recording you and you don't know it.
Yeah.
And they're looking for a lawsuit. They're looking for, hey, look, you need, X amount of women on this job. I'm just going to go sit there and do fucking nothing like that. I've seen that.
And look at what that does to the women that are out there, trying, and you know what I mean? It's that slippery slope. It's like, what do? You don't want to tell, no, you can't have women in the construction industry, or, you can't have women in the military, but you have to create that safe space then. Well, and how do you do that?
It almost makes sense to be able to just this isn't working out. This isn't going to work out. See you later. And if you do that with everyone, then if you're there for the right reasons, you're going to make it. And if you're there for the wrong reasons, you're not. Yeah. And that applies to men. That applies to, I mean, there's a ton of men in construction and the military, they just suck.
Yes.
They just suck. Yeah. And they don't enjoy their experience because they're not putting their best foot forward. Yeah. And it's always the union sucks and the construction sucks and I hate this and I hate that and blah. And you hear that a lot. And I'm sure it's the same in the military, So yeah, it seems like if you could cut ties with people that don't work out and you get rid of this, this Title IX stuff kind of, then that kind of solves the problem. Cause then you can find those diamonds in the rough. You can find those women that it's really going to work out for. Yeah. And then the other ones you could kind of just say, hey, look, it's not working.
I think a lot of it is environment, like I said, safety, and I have a friend, and I don't want to speak too much on it, but she was stationed overseas in Iraq, and she experienced an assault in a porta potty. In a porta potty,
It's worse than a submarine.
Yeah, I mean, like the dignity, the loss, what it does to self. And I do think that one of the major issues is, we have people in the military that have trauma, and there's all these stigmas around mental health. Well, my boyfriend, excuse me, he's a Marine, and he was a chief warrant officer, and he actually had one of his leaders tell him that PTSD wasn't a real thing.
Mm.
And I think that, we spoke a little bit about past generations. Well, that Vietnam era, they were not welcome home. They were crapped on as soon as they came back. They still, like, if you see a Vietnam veteran, just welcome them home. It will just make their whole entire world. So you have generations of military trauma that are still active duty in the military. They're not helping themselves. They're not getting the mental health help that they need. So it's just a continuation. It's military generational trauma that consists in the ranks, and it just keeps going year after year after year. That's why it's a DOD issue. Why is mental health such a stigma for active duty military? We have all kinds of resources as veterans. We can go to the VA hospital. We have veteran service organizations. Well, what do you do if you're active duty and you're experiencing these things? There's no one to go to.
You would think they would treat it like they treat cops. I mean, if a cop fires his gun one time, they're like, all right, take a break. Let's evaluate you. Are you okay?
When I went through my experience, which was, like I said, base police were involved. I had to go to the hospital and all that. They made me go to one mental health appointment to get an evaluation to document what happened. Other than that, I didn't get any other services. That's why I went 20 years. I didn't even know what battered women syndrome was. I was like, huh? And the messed up thing is, I was young. I was a kid. I went in the military at 19. I had not experienced anything in the world. I was a brand new mom. And then because I didn't get the help that I needed, because nobody told me that I had PTSD, they just documented it in my medical record, I went and got in another relationship and endured this very same thing. But this time it was with a narcissist who had bipolar and addiction and all kinds of other stuff. And he almost killed me. And I'm like, well, what's wrong with me? Not very many people that are experiencing intimate partner violence realize that they have a role in their own abuse. And that's what I had to figure out is what's wrong with me that I continue to keep allowing this? Well, because I didn't get the help that I needed back when I was active duty, I thought it was normal. I thought this is what was supposed to happen. So I did it again and almost died. My kids almost didn't have a mother. So once I went to battered women's group and I went to PTSD group therapy, I was able to talk because that was my biggest thing. I couldn't talk to anybody. I didn't share my experiences. I didn't tell anybody what I went through for almost 20 years. I've been grateful because I have the same mental health provider since '06 that I got out. So she's got to see all this transition and all this growth. And, when I needed help with medication and when I haven't been on meds for a very long time. So I think that having consistency and continuity of mental health care is a priority, but it needs to start while you're active duty. You can't get it after the fact because, again, you have people that don't believe that they're veterans, or you have veterans that don't know how to go about even filing for a claim. So if you get it while they're, in the hands of the DOD, then you're good to go. So it is a systematic issue. And I've asked this question many a times over, different interviews that I've done before. Who's holding the DOD accountable? Because this is where it's happening. You're never going to fix the problem if you don't get to the root cause. And the root cause is in the DOD.
That's tough. That's a tough one to get to. Mm-hmm. It really is. But you're doing your part, right? You've spoken in front of the Assembly Military and Veterans Affairs Committee about these exact issues that we're talking about right now. You're just in the forefront of everything. Like you said, I'll talk to anybody that'll talk to me. Anyone with ears. Yeah. And I was introduced to you through this sound bath thing.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
Flounder came on the thing with I did this sound bath. It was really nice. So let's talk about the sound bath. Like how is that? What is it? What are we doing?
So so through, learning about my PTSD and everything, I needed an outlet. I'm a single mom with a bunch of kids, so it's not like I have, all this freedom. I went to this event, a meditation event, and I put this singing bowl in my hand and I was like, whoa, what is this? It's frequency and vibrations. I have 10 to 12 bowls that I use, and each are tuned to specific frequencies, and they are in alignment with your chakras. And it helps you get into this meditative flow state where you are able, I guide people in and I guide people out. But what I'm able to do is I'm able to take people back to these points in trauma from a different version. They're at a more healed version of themselves. They're not going in as the same person that was experiencing the trauma. They're going in as somebody else. So you're able to remote view it in a sense, and you're able to see all aspects of the trauma. Because again, as a victim of military sexual trauma and intimate partner violence, I was part of the problem. And not too many women want to admit that they're part of the problem. But guess what? I was. I was the victim, and I dished it out too at times. I'm human. So I needed to find something for me, and I couldn't, as a veteran, like my brain don't stop. It just goes and goes and goes. And that's why I'm able to do a lot of the really cool things that I do, is because I'm like, nah, just keep moving machine. The bowls slowed me down. The bowls forced me to take a look at myself, and they forced me to look at these different things within myself. And I kind of took it and ran with it, and I built this business. And for the last 4 years, I have a group. We call ourselves a tribe. We heal together, we laugh together, we grow together. And every week we meet up, and I do sound healing sessions. But it's not just, the singing bowls that have the vibrations and the frequencies. We do integration as well. So that means talk therapy. I use the singing bowls and the frequencies along with narrative therapy techniques that kind of combine the frequencies, as well as going in to look at the trauma from a different perspective. And it helps heal on a cellular level. It's going to the root of the problem.
That's great. Yeah, you talk about this change of perspective and how that allows you to heal and process the trauma. It's funny that these psilocybin mushrooms is one of the things that they've studied is that's what it helps you do is it changes your perspective on the trauma itself to help you heal.
Hurt people.
Yeah.
And if you have no self-awareness and you're not even able to recognize that you could be part of the problem, you're not going to be able to fix anything. Like I said, with the abuse, I got caught in victim mode, and I'm sure, we hear that a lot with, the spiritual community now is, people being in victim mode, like, oh, this one did that to me or that one. I allowed those things to happen to me. You know why I allowed those things to happen to me? Because I didn't love me. I didn't know how to love myself. I had no self-worth. I had no self-value. I didn't know anything. And it wasn't until I started to love myself and love all the versions of myself, even the ones that I didn't like, that rock bottom, that, veteran that was drinking too much, or that veteran that, was just trying to avoid everything. I had to learn to love those versions too, and like I said, the sound healing is just focusing on those frequencies, and I play in a way where I combined a lot of them. So it's just kind of like, like I said, my brain is nonstop. That's kind of similar with the bowls, but you're able to focus on the sounds of the frequencies, and your body is also vibrating. So it's like you're forced to be present, but you're also forced to have this self-awareness to where you can see things from a different point of view, a more healed version and a more accepting, loving, and graceful version. Because I think that's one of the hardest things about, we don't show ourselves grace. We give everybody else grace, but we don't give ourselves grace. We're our own worst enemies at times. And I think, veterans and just people in general, construction, police officers, our toolkits to beat up ourselves seem to be pretty jam-packed, and we blame ourselves. And in order to do that, we have to take accountability and self-reflect and self-awareness. And once we realize that we too are part of the problem, it opens up this area to just examine everything that you've been through, childhood
you can
stuff.
Fix it, right?
Yeah.
Like once you kind of identify all the sources of the problem, it helps you fix it.
But it's never, like, no one is ever 100% healed. I don't care who you are. If somebody says they're 100% healed, run.
Well, I mean, would you want to be?
No. That's the whole point of being here.
Make everything great?
Yeah.
Is having that shit
to
think about?
That's part of the life experience,
It's the yin and the yang.
There is no good or bad. There is just life experience. People get so focused on these things. Like, listen, there are some days I couldn't tell you how I got through the things that I've gotten through, but I have hope. I have hope and I have faith. And I don't look at the things that I've been through and woe is me. I'm like, no, like I've been given this. It's a gift. I am grateful for the abuse. I know that sounds crazy, but I'm grateful for every life experience that I've had, because if I didn't have those experiences, I wouldn't be sitting here with you. So it's like you can look at your life and say, oh, it's bad or it's fucked up or this, that, or the other. But no, it just is. It's neither good or bad. Like we're all here to give our perspectives. Your perspective is unique and so is his. We're all here for a reason. And if we don't give ourselves the opportunity to look at ourselves from a higher perspective, we're going to just stay stagnant.
So I got to ask, Flounder said you start off every sound healing session with a loud scream outside, as loud as you can.
Our river roar. So I started out on a farm and there was a river, and we moved over. We're actually at the Hamilton DAV Hall, and we're supposed to be quiet. We're not allowed to yell. We're not allowed to raise our voice. Well, before every session, we reset our vagus nerve and we reset our nervous system, all that bullshit, all the funk that you've been hanging on to. We scream and we get it out, and it kind of like gives your nervous system a reset, and you're able to go into the meditative flow state in a more calm state. So it's very awkward. It's supposed to make people feel awkward. We usually do 2 of them, but you can't hear anybody. A lot of people, we have people that get down on their hands and knees, like grip the earth. Like it is. It's a whole experience. You'll have to come out.
I do have to come out.
Listen, there's people that, they'll have leg twitches and their back is hurting. Like they know what chakra I hit because they'll have these different pains and different, people see colors and geometrical shapes. We do mushroom journeys as well. Those are a little more deep. But it's all like, people just have to learn how to love all versions of themselves. You don't have to like them, but love all versions of yourself, even the bad ones, because at the end of the day, gratitude is the attitude. You know what I mean? If you didn't go through those things, you wouldn't be who you are today. And I don't think anybody can, you're here.
Yeah.
So
it's funny. I had an acting class in college, and one of the warm-ups was you had to scream at the top of your lungs in front of everyone. Like you went around the room just screaming. And I always thought it was kind of just like, all right, well,
no, it works.
I look like an idiot, so now it doesn't matter if I'm an idiot,
It works, and we even people do it in their cars. You grab the steering wheel, and it gets all that stuff out.
It does feel good to yell.
Emotions are just energy in motion.
Mm-hmm.
That's all that it is. Whether you're angry, you're sad, you're mad, you're depressed, it's energy, and it needs somewhere to go. Well, if you keep it stored in, that's what dis-ease is. If you I've had, I got the anthrax shot, so I've had all kinds of, medical issues, unfortunately. But one of the things that I've dealt with a lot is breast masses. If you look up like the spiritual significance of breast masses with, different correlations, it's self-love. I'm the worst at that, up until recently. So it's like there's a correlation to everything. If you have something going on with your right shoulder or your left knee, look it up. I guarantee you, whatever ailment you have going on, there's a spiritual connection to it. So moving that energy and think about a cancer patient. They're fine, they're living great, and then they find out that they have cancer.
And they get sick.
Yep. Well, it's that perspective and that mentality change. I do personally believe that we have the ability to heal within. I was on diabetes medication up until 2014. And I mean, I could go on and on about the medical ailments that I've been able to heal. And I think a lot of that is because I've healed and I've done the inner work. I've done the self-reflection, and I've looked at the things that, were causing me such pain.
Yeah, we've definitely learned through a couple different episodes that like stress has just stresses in life have so much to do with like your actual physical health, which is insane.
Well, it does, because when you're stressed out, your cortisol levels are through the roof. Your cortisol levels are elevated, then you're going to have issues with your heart and all kinds of other things.
It just creates this hormonal imbalance, and it just throws you all off.
And I'll tell you, that's one of the things that I loved about going to a PTSD group therapy over at the Philadelphia VA. I learned so many tools, and some of the tools that I learned from going to that group was how to manage the stress in my life. Because I am a veteran, there's certain times where like I can handle these immense, like big, if something big's going on, I got it. I'm cool as a cucumber. But at times there's these small things that happen and I'm like, oh shit, it's the end of the world. So going to mental health providers and going to group therapies, I learned how to manage the stress. And because I learned how to manage the stress, I lowered my cortisol levels, and I wasn't, there was times where I was sick for months. I couldn't even get out of bed. So in order to do that, again, you got to get sick of your own shit. And at some point in time, there is no one coming to save you. No one. you have to save yourself. If you sit and wait for somebody to come and save you, you're going to die.
Never. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're exactly right.
Well, I appreciate you having me on here, and I know that these things aren't always easy to talk about, and I can only imagine for a man, talking about military sexual trauma and rape and different things is not comfortable. But I'll tell you that you having me on here and you asking these questions, and this is what helps. This is how you can help, and how you can just keep people telling their stories. Bring other veterans in and whatnot, because we do need the help of males. We are fighting for gender specific care, but at the end of the day, we need male allies as well. And I think you call John Flounder, is that what you call him?
Yeah.
He's a phenomenal advocate for women veterans. He actually comes out to our women veterans meetings. But I hope that you open yourself and your platform to more things like this. And I know a lot of veterans, male veterans, female veterans. And if you want to hear, some stories, I'll give you some stories. But keep doing what you're doing, because this is what, that awareness, that's what helps us. So thank you.
I appreciate that. Thank you very much. And thank you for coming on. And hopefully we'll talk again soon.
Yeah, thank you.
See ya.